More hidden abilities that didn't help these Pokemon by False Swipe Gaming.
We made a video about hidden abilities that didn't help the Pokemon they were given to, and we're back for more. However, whereas last time we focused on several abilities that were never released, this time we're focusing purely on released abilities that not only didn't help, but were given to Pokemon that really needed it. Additionally, we're going to propose some reasonable alternatives that could boost these Pokemon a little. They're not going to storm Ubers or anything, but they'll at least let them do what they're supposed to do effectively. So let's dive right into more hidden abilities that didn't help and how to fix them. But before
I do like the subjective discourse. I like being able to talk about, but if we gave them this ability, this could do this, or if it got this move, it would be thematic and do what it needs to. I always like it. It's so interesting to approach from a speculative standpoint.
Before we start, this video is sponsored by Helix Sleep. Helix is the most comfortable mattress there is. It's even on par with some resort beds I've slept on, and that's because this mattress was matched with me via Helix's sleep quiz. My partner and I both took the quiz, and they sent us a mattress that is perfect for us. We received the Helix Midnight. This mattress is great for me because I am a back sleeper, as I specified on the quiz, and I also have back problems, so I can't sleep on something too soft, or my body will sink too far in and hurt my back. Luckily, the Helix Midnight is the perfect firmness for me. The mattress comes rolled up and compressed as a box, and it's very easy to set up. Like literally, you just unwrap it on the bed and watch it decompress and form. Helix was even kind enough to send us a mattress with Glaciotech's cooling cover, which keeps us cool and comfortable while we sleep. I especially love this feature because for many years I've had to deal with memory foam mattresses absorbing my body heat and the heat waking me up at night. Now I can safely say I do not experience that. The Helix lineup offers 20 unique mattresses, including their award-winning Luxe and Ultra Premium Elite collections. And the best part about all of this is that the Helix has a 100-night sleep trial, so you get to use it for 3 months for free to make sure you love it. Helix Mattresses has a 10-year warranty, and they even offer financing options and a flexible payment plan. And of course, Helix offers free shipping in the US. So if you want the most comfortable mattress ever and support the channel to help us produce more content, click the link in the description below to get an exclusive offer of 20% off. And thank you so much to Helix for sponsoring this video.
So that was about 2 minutes and 3 seconds. If we go back to, so this was about what, a minute? This is a 90-second ad read. I think it went a little too long. That is a subjective thing, but obviously, if the advertiser says, "Hey, it needs to be 90 seconds long," there's nothing you can really do about that. Audio is consistent. Background noise not super loud. I think it was very additive, very on theme. Mattress Pokemon. I guess if you want to talk about things like Pokemon Sleep that are products that actually exist, technically it is on theme. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I think it was a great ad read. I said audio is consistent. Audio quality was fine. Music quality was fine. Music volume not super bad. Quality was consistent. Relevant visual aids. Acknowledgement of using product himself. Yeah, no, I think it'd be great. I think this is a solid ad read. I liked it. I know there's people who go, Kip, you rate everything like a 7 out of 10 or like whatever. What's a bad ad read? I was in the room while someone was watching American football recently, and they read off something that was just so tone deaf, and I'm just like, yeah, that company should be asking for their money back. Like, that was a god awful ad read. So I do, in fact, give 0 out of 10s or 1 out of 10s. It does happen. That being said, there's a certain quality that YouTubers do bring to the table that are just strictly better. So yeah, I like it. 8 out of 10.
Articuno has always had it the roughest of the original legendary birds, at least after Generation 1. In the RBY landscape where Special Attack and Special Defense were both one stat, simply known as Special, Articuno clocked in with the other birds at base 125, while packing Stab on one of the gen's most popular attacks, Blizzard, which was tied for the single strongest special attack in the game, out-damaging even Mewtwo's Psychic. Then Gen 2 came around and split the special stat in two. Zapdos and Moltres were fine, as they retained their base 125 special attack. Articuno, on the other hand, kept its base 125 special defense, which was all well and good, but its special attack dropped down to base 95, and it was toast.
So that's the problem inherently. So Articuno is half ice type. It is flying ice, right? Ice types are notoriously weak to things. Ice type is very much a offensive typing, same as rock type, right? Ground can be offensive, obviously has things like earthquake, right? But it has a lot of defenses, has a lot of resistances and stuff like that, right? So there are things like ground and steel, which can be both offensive and defensive, things that are generally just pretty good. You do have more offensive typings, which are going to be things like fire, which are going to be things like rock, which are going to be things like ice. You'll have defensive typing like water. Obviously, water has a lot of resistances. Bulky water types is a meme for a reason. So when we start talking about why this is bad for Articuno, it getting the special defense drop, like the special defense is the higher of the two, does effectively nothing. Sure, I mean, you're maybe looking at calculations from Thunderbolt, Thunder, etc., but like it would have been much better if it got special attack as what was the higher stat. I 100% think that would have been a net positive for it.
Blizzard keeping its original 90% accuracy wouldn't have saved it. Articuno's superb special bulk doesn't get it very far considering its awful typing. Among the worst in the game for anything, much less a Pokemon whose stat spread is geared toward hit taking, redolent with effortlessly exploitable weaknesses. It's a shame because Articuno actually has some great defensive utility, as was demonstrated in its niche in Gen 7 UU, a bright spot in a career otherwise regularly marred by flawed appearances even in the lowest tiers. Defog and Pressure together allowed it to PP stall the Stealth Rocket aim to remove, while Heal Bell and Pressure meant it stall you out of Toxics too. Plus, in long games, it could effectively fish for freezes with its water-hitting Ice Stab Freeze Dry. Cool, right? The problem was that this was an exception, as Articuno's flaws are usually so glaring, you don't get to utilize its talents to the extent you'd like.
Yeah.
Sure, it's had some solid outings in PU, which struggled to stand up to its Hurricane, but really, this is the bottom of the barrel here. A legendary bird beating up not fully evolved Pokemon is not exactly impressive. So that brings us to the hidden ability.
Does Articuno still flap even after the whole flying type controversy? I am wording it on purpose that way. Where, remember we had the flying battles, and we have a lot of models that are just statically flying, right? You know what I'm talking about? Articuno still flaps though, right? That's interesting to think about. Interesting.
Of it all. Articuno makes quite a good use of pressure, whether it's stalling or going the more offensive sub-route. However, so too do Moltres and Zapdos. That doesn't stop them from also wringing tons of value out of their excellent secondary hidden abilities, which have been major contributing factors in their continued competitive success. Zapdos' static has famously been a thorn in the side of the ever-irritating Tornadus, while making Kartana really regret attacking. Moltres' Flame Body strikes a similarly punishing chord. What does Articuno have to play with in this vein? Snow Cloak. To say this is worthless is already more than it deserves because it acknowledges its existence. So to compensate for this, let us once again state its worthlessness on such a scale it feels almost cosmically incomprehensible. It needs to be paired with a second ice type to set up Snow Warning, so that best case, it would have a few turns of decreased accuracy against it. This wouldn't get it anywhere. The problem is that, in keeping with Zapdos and Moltres' ability, this hidden ability has to be something that nods to Articuno's ice typing, but almost all ice-related abilities are hail-dependent, which makes them equally terrible.
Right, because in Scarlet and Violet, we lost hail and gained snow, so I actually need to see how these are being rewritten, because that is 100% a thing. I don't know, I still don't understand why they did it. Like, that's one of those that like I've noted, but I have been so absent for Scarlet and Violet, just because of netcode issues. The game's frame rate and multiplayer giving me a headache. I played through both Scarlet and Violet. I had my fun, absolutely. But there are definitely things that keep me from playing the game. Not just from a like game bad stance. I don't think the game's bad. I think that there's just some mechanical stuff that just makes my head hurt a little bit. So we'll see if the Switch 2 addresses any of that, or how the next Pokemon title will work on the Switch 2. Yeah, no, I wonder if some of these have been rewritten. I mean, like from a Gen 7... Gen 8 standpoint, I mean, well, more like Gen 7, really. I mean, I wonder if you take a Snow Warning Alola Ninetales with Aurora Veil in with a Articuno. I wonder how well that would go, or if there's just better options, especially because Alola Ninetales is just a Blizzard machine. I wonder if it serves as an active detriment.
And if Ice Body or Slush Rush would be better, mostly Ice Body, it's not like it would have made an actual difference. The one exception would be Ice Scales, whose having of special damage would make Articuno truly ridiculous as a special wall. It might be—
Didn't Frostmoth get this, though? I think it was Frostmoth. Pokemon Ice Scales. Who got this? Yeah, it's the Frostmoth line. But that's the thing, is like, that's a moth. I don't think that ice scales quite make sense. You could have maybe like a thematic ice scales, like the effect, but it's a different name, a ability native to Articuno, but or Articuno if I want to get Pokemon 2000 about it. I don't know if it fits though. I don't know if the ice scales necessarily fits though.
Be exactly what it needs to make up for its many flaws. In effect, it loses its non-quadruple weaknesses, meaning it could, for example, take a Heatran Fire Blast just fine. Snow Warning would be interesting too. However, Snow Cloak is, as the kids say, not it, Chief. Having said that,
I think Snow Warning makes a lot more sense because when we look at, are we fixing the Pokemon or are we allowing it to do what it needs to do, right? If we're going back Pokemon 2000, Titan of Ice, right? I think Snow Warning makes a lot more sense. I think being able to drop Hail makes a lot more sense than having Ice Scales, personally. I think one of these, the Ice Scales route is fixing the Pokemon for competitive play and fixing its flaws versus applying a thematic effect that is consistent with the design. I think Snow Warning makes more sense ultimately.
Snowcloak Articuno did win a VGC regional once, but
Wild.
Was that Articuno banking its entire strategy on the opponent not being able to hit it? You know, the Articuno with choice specs and 4 ice attacks with Terra Ice? No.
So notice how it's playing though, like I said earlier, right? Notice how this Articuno is having to play 4 ice types, Terra Ice, giving it its stab is now 2.0 instead of 1.5, right? It's almost like Articuno just needs more power to function. It's almost like the better stat that it should have gotten with that 125 would have been its special attack. Interesting to think about, right? I swear, sometimes I feel like I know what I'm talking about. Only sometimes, though.
Oh, it was like, so anyways, I started blasting and blizzarding things left and right. The Snow Cloak, while helpful, was definitely the cherry on top to the strategy, but not the main substance of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, makes sense. Yeah.
The Diamond and Pearl Pokemon were amazing in their debut generation, then continued to thrive in Generation 5. However, they started to slow with Gen 6 and its fairy introduction. They still had niches, but were a far cry from their glory days, with Palkia falling out completely once the Soul Dew Laddie twins returned to Earth Serpent as Kyogre answers in Oraz. Dialga's Steel typing giving it fairy neutrality, and Stab Flash Cannon meant it was better off, but it too fell by the wayside in Gen 7, as it could not compete with the excellence of the fairy resistant Necrozma Duskmane. Palkia returned to okay effect in the Primal Groudon-less Gen 8 Uber landscape, but it was still a shell of its former self, especially paling in comparison to Eternatus, while Dialga couldn't muster much of an impact either. Even fancy new origin forms in Gen 9 have been ineffective at finding them real niches, while their OG forms are more hapless than ever in this metagame dominated by Koraidon, Miraidon, Necrozma Duskmane, Zacian Crown, and Eternatus.
I think that Zacian Crowned is definitely a big contender there, especially with it being that fairy typing. Zacian Crowned having access to play rough. I mean, like, there's just a lot of... You have to understand, this was from a time period where dragon typings just had the line go up exponential curve, right? Like, that was kind of dragon types. We had one dragon type in Gen 1. Well, one dragon type family, right? We had Dratini, Dragonair, and Dragonite, right? And then in Gen 2, we had access to Kingler, right? And then we get into Gen 3, we have things like Rayquaza, we have things like Bagon, Shelgon, Salamence, we have things like Trapinch, Vibrava, Flygon, right? We started to see more dragon types. And then we start moving into Gen 4 and 5. Gen 5 is when we got things like Druddigon, we got things like the Axew line, like... We really started to get a lot of dragon types, and actually that's why in Gen 6, why we had the advent of fairy type, because dragon types, especially Hydreigon in Gen 5, good god, we needed an answer for a lot of those dragons, especially dragons like Dark Dragon, Hydreigon, which started seeing a lot of play because they were kind of good. Dragonite gets no love outside of TCG. I disagree. Dragonite does get multi-scale and does see play in certain formats. Dragonite absolutely gets some cool tools. But yeah, no, Dialga and Palkia were product of their time. It's why I refer to Dracovish as a Palkia-lite. I refer to Archaludon as Dialga-lite because it's their typings. And that's why we have things like Dragapult as well, which are Ghost Dragon. It's just Baby Giratina for all intents and purposes. So anytime I see those typings, I kind of refer to things like that.
Pressure was never really a tool Dialga and Palkia used, actively or otherwise, with the exception of certain substitute protect sets on both in Generation 4. They've pretty much functioned without ability for their entire existence. Their shared hidden ability Telepathy does nothing to dispel this notion. We remember Telepathy as useless, but weren't sure if that was because what it did was so bad that it was never worthwhile, or that it was literally useless in the way Illuminate or Runaway are. In being
It's useless in singles because it literally does nothing. The ability exists. It still has ability, telepathy, right? Like, it still has substance there, but in singles, it does nothing. Now, if we want to talk about things like Illuminate, where, if I remember correctly, Illuminate was, it draws Pokemon to you. Let's go back a little bit, actually.
Entire existence. Their shared hidden ability Telepathy does nothing to dispel this notion. We remember Telepathy as useless, but weren't sure if that was because what it did was so bad that it was never worthwhile, or that it was literally...
Yeah, so we look at Runaway, enables a sure getaway from wild Pokemon. This does nothing in VGC. This does nothing in competitive Pokemon. Illuminate prevents other Pokemon from losing Pokemon's accuracy. Stat stage. This Pokemon ignores, because I was thinking of a different one. I was thinking of a different thing. This Pokemon ignores a target's evasiveness set stage. I mean, Illuminate serves a purpose. So Telepathy is completely useless in singles. It does nothing. Now, if we start talking about VGC, sure, it might have some usage depending on what your team is, depending if you're earthquaking a lot. But then again, are you just not running something that can levitate or fly over the earthquake? Why are you just not running that? Why are you doing it, right? Or running protect, right? Now, if we talk about, what was it? We used to have the triple multi-battles, stuff like that. Now, maybe that saw usage in there. So I think telepathy just, it's good. It's a good tool. I think that it can have some interesting interactions, but I think that it just doesn't do anything to further your game state. It just makes you impervious to a specific interaction, you having a partner Pokemon on a specific subset of moves, those like Surf and Earthquake that can also hit your own Pokemon. So, I also feel like, what is it? If you hit a frozen Pokemon with Scald or a fire attack, doesn't it unfreeze them? Like, it thaws them out? So this would mean, hypothetically, if it dodges the attack of its allies, do you not burn a turn if you enter the situation where your Palkia / Dialga are frozen and you try to unfreeze them? I'm certain, just reading the ability, that the attack from your ally would just miss. Thus, you've lost an entire turn.
Useless in the way Illuminate or Runaway are. It being so forgettable pretty much speaks for itself, but any hopes for this to be some overlooked gem of an ability were dashed upon checking Bulbapedia and seeing that its effect is only for doubles. So as far as this mostly singles-based video is concerned, Telepathy is indeed useless. But don't worry, we'll speak on its doubles usage at the end of this. Anyways, there is, and we hate to misuse this word, so rest assured we're using it properly, literally nothing they can use Telepathy for, which would be fine if they hadn't dropped to the status of Uber only by virtue of being too strong for OU, as opposed to being too strong for OU and being able to slug it out with the highest tier. The real shame is that there are extremely obvious candidates for their second abilities that are long overdue, at least their origin forms were.
I thought that Uber was above OU. I don't know. I thought if you dropped to Uber, you were, well, I thought the only thing above Uber was Anything Goes, AG, right? That's the tier where Mega Rayquaza, Zacian, and Zacian Crown live, right? Did I mishear?
For OU and being able to slug it out with the highest tier. The real shame is that there are extremely obvious candidates for their second ability.
I'm not entirely sure. I thought that it was OU was below Ubers, and then above Ubers was AG, and thus you go under OU, and that's when you start getting like UU and other formats as well. I'm not entirely sure how that's structured.
Abilities that are long overdue, at least their origin forms, for crying out loud. We refer, of course, to the currently non-existent abilities that set Trick Room and Gravity upon switching in for Dialga and Palkia respectively. We have
But, so I guess, so, I don't know if that really fits though. Because, I mean, Trick Room, I feel Dimension Twist might be better for Palkia, actually. Because when we talk about space, because they're space and time, respectively, Gravity is kind of what is headcanon to be Giratina. So, well, I see the thematic nature of this. I see that it utilizes existing effects. I don't know, and I don't think we have a setter for either of these either. Like we have the Tapu Wars back in Gen 7, which set terrains, right? We had terrain wars. We have weather wars still to this day with Groudon and Kyogre, right? I don't know. I think if we're looking at a strictly in-game like status or effect setter, I think I like these. I like it from that standpoint. If we're looking at a true one-to-one what they do, I don't think I'm as much of a fan, but I do like the attempt here, and I think that it would be very interesting. I would think it would add a lot of usage. I don't know if Dimension Twist would be used. So Dimension Twist would probably have to proc whatever is currently set. So if there's no Trick Room and you swap it on in, it would set Trick Room. And if say U turns out or switches out and then comes back in on a Trick Room, it would undo the Trick Room. I think I would like that for Dialga. I think that would be really cool. Kind of like the whole warping of time. I can see that. Effects of gravity are activated. I don't actually remember what gravity even does. Pokemon gravity. Isn't it things like can't fly or something like that? Something. Gravity. Not Psychinium Z, that's Gen 7. Prevents moves like fly and bounce, and the ability to levitate for 5 turns. There might be one better, but I think I like it. I think if these actually happened, I think I'd be okay with them. I think like if they actually were actually released in game tomorrow, I think I'd be cool with them. I think it gives them some really neat utility, especially since you could use something like Palkia, Gravitational Pull, to activate. I think Palkias would have to. Well, so both would have to either trigger the effects whenever they're swapped in, or they would activate, which is 2 separate things, right? Swapping in and they're setters, right? They don't undo the effect. I think that would probably be better for Palkia. Whereas what would be better for Dialga is anytime it switched in, I think. I don't know. I think they'd probably be setters much in the same way things like Drizzle work, things like Psychic Surge work. I think that they would probably work the same way. I think I'm okay with it. I had to warm up it took me a second to warm up. I think that these are decent. I like them.
No idea why this hasn't been done yet. Surely nobody at Game Freak thinks it'd be too metagame breaking. There's no way that is one of their concerns. Certainly not after the last 4 generations have featured Mega Rayquaza, Ultra Necrozma, Zacian Crown, and both Koraidon and Miraidon. Dialga would certainly be the superior beneficiary, as Trick Room upon switching in is insane. You could check what feels like every boosting sweeper ever with it, and it would be an astonishing good late game cleaner. Gravity wouldn't necessarily change much for Palkia itself, sure, but being unable to miss Hydro Pump and Fire Blast is wonderful, but it's not like those moves in perfect accuracy is what's holding them back. What would make it more interesting, almost certainly enough to carve out a real niche for itself, however small, would be how the auto-set Gravity would help Palkia's team. Notably, flying types would no longer be immune to the spikes and Earthquake that Palkia would inevitably be paired with. This could make it akin to Sticky Web in a way, highly specific but potentially amazing team support. If you want to stick with abilities that actually exist, let's go with adaptability. The power boost would be superb, yet hardly overbearing, and thematically, Dialga and Palkia would be quite adaptable if they can bend time and space, right? Either way, telepathy has, as the kids say, not passed the vibe check. And here's our brief doubles portion on these two. Even though telepathy is a doubles format ability, Dialga and Palkia are still left in the dust usage-wise by their competitors in restricted VGC formats. And honestly, it's kind of hard to compete with Kyogre, Calyrex, Primal Groudon, Zacian Crown, etc, etc. In fact, they haven't really seen notable usage since 2010, when as many as 4 restricted Pokemon were allowed on a team, so long as only 2 were brought to battle. And back then, they didn't have telepathy. So there's that.
So notice though, when we talk about the hypothetical abilities or even adaptability, notice that these are, like we said earlier, these are furthering your game state, right? What does telepathy do to further your game state? It just gives you immunity in some niche instances, right? Okay. Cool. What does something like Drizzle do for Kyogre? Not only does it set rain, not only does it make fire moves do less damage, but it also powers up its water moves by 50%. That's why you see things like Choice Specs, Water Spout, Kyogre, right? Sets its own rain, just absolutely wrecks. So it furthers its own game state. You look at things like the setting Trick Room and setting Gravity, right? They're furthering a game state. The effect is activating on switch in and applying the effect immediately. it's furthering your game state in some way, shape, or form, whether that's something like Dialga checking some big sweepers, whether that's Palkia using a sort of sticky web effect like he was mentioning. It helps further your game state. Telepathy does nothing in singles. In doubles, interacts with a few niche interactions and doesn't further your game state. And I think that's really the big one. That's really the big shift there. Damn.
Swampert was the target of many an explosion in Generations 3 and 4. Such a risky, powerful move was one of the few ways to cut through its famously sturdy defenses. It often circumvented the move through Protect that it relied on for healing, making such a proposition even riskier. But still, it would have loved to have not had to play so cautiously around Metagross. You didn't want to get blown up and then become vulnerable to its teammate Dragon Dance Tyranitar, but the Metagross user could take advantage of that and wind up meteor matching a teammate of yours that wasn't quite so apt at tanking the move as all-reliable Pert was. Same with something like Heatran. It wouldn't have to switch out of lead Azelf, or even something it should sit on completely like Bronzong. So Generation 5 gifting it the Damped ability was absolutely heavenly. This would extend its already long defensive reach even further. Damped Swampert would now be completely unthreatened by any booms. Oh yeah, about that. You know what else was unthreatened by booms in Gen 5? Everything. Because the move had been nerfed. No longer did they have the opponent's defense effectively.
Sorry, it was Gen 5, yeah. I thought Gen 4 they nerfed it. Yeah, Gen 5. So that's a correction from the other one we did.
Bringing them from 250 base power to 500. So strong that they sliced through even many Arizas. Nope, they were just good old 250 BP now. Not at all shabby by any means, but certainly not worth sacrificing an entire Pokemon for. Being explosion immune was no longer a big deal. Everything was explosion immune now. That's an exaggeration, of course. But seeing as the move practically disappeared from use, and when it did show up, it was for momentum, not damage, Swampert's hidden ability was thus rendered useless. Of course, Swampert was still a fine Pokemon. It even used its Torrent ability more often than you'd think, especially in Gen 3. It just could have been even better if it had a good alternative to try. One that bolstered its defenses, that became more important as the new generation and generations made its offenses less and less impressive. One could argue that Mega Swampert and Swift Swim fulfilled that role, and it certainly did in Gen 6 and 7. But once the Megas disappeared in Gen 8, perhaps Swampert could have picked up something like Stamina. It's a Mudfish, Mudsdale gets the ability, it fits, and it would do wonders for it.
Maybe. So when we talk about abilities like Damp not seeing play, right? What we're specifically discussing is when the thing that it's countering is no longer present or an issue, why would the ability stick around? So we have things like Storm Drain. Why will Storm Drain and Water Absorb still see play? Things like Muddy Water are going to see play. Things like Surf are going to see play. Things like Flip Turn are going to see play, right? A lot of water moves, right, are going to see a lot of play, rightfully so. That's why things like Storm Drain and Water Absorb are still going to just be great. They will still continue to see usage. Now, in a metagame that's, say, very fire intensive, right? Say there's a brand new fire type, right? And it's able to throw off some flare blitzes or some really cool fire moves. Like, say there was Muddy Water, but fire, right? Well, I guess it's Heat Wave, technically, right? Say Heat Wave becomes super popular or something like, or Flamethrower gets buffed or something like that. Then you have Pokemon that have Flash Fire, right? You have things like Lightning Rod. If people try to use things like Volt Switch, Thunder, Thunderbolt. Okay, makes sense. So we have entire things that are kind of broad, right, in what they do. Some are going to see more usage than others, i.e. Water Absorb, Storm Drain, etc. Because not only is it generic, it generically says that blue type right there, water, I'm going to suck it up, right? Storm Drain, Water Absorb. So you will see usage on that versus down to things like Flash Fire, which do exist. Few Pokemon get it. And it just depends on you actually going into the right Pokemon, calling the correct switch to be able to get hit by the fire move, right? That's also why Flash Fire sees a little bit less play, because it doesn't draw it in. It's similar to Water Absorb more than Storm Drain. Storm Drain kind of attracts it. So why Damp sees an issue is when the base power of Explosion and Self-Destruct get halved and nobody uses it, the ability is now effectively useless. And even if you don't have the ability and you do see a self-destruct or explosion, you're still going to probably live the hit if you're playing the game right? Not that everything is hyperbolic immune, right? Like he's saying, it's a hyperbole. That's just Yeah, they're not actually immune to it, but it's doing far less damage than it used to, and you can reasonably live the hits with a lot of things, so less of an issue. Stamina, I don't know if it fits with Chonky Mudfish. I mean, if you want to go the Mega route, Swift Swim, did get Swift Swim. I think that does make a lot of sense. But once again, Pokemon abilities that they get with their Mega Evolutions don't necessarily transfer over to their base forms, so which makes a lot of sense. I mean, Torrent it's already got Torrent as base 1. I'd have to think about it for a bit. I don't think Stamina quite makes sense, though. I don't think it's trying to be a bulky Mudfish. I think that it's trying to be far more offensive. And I think that when we look at what Mudsdale doesn't quite try to brute force through things. Not in the same way as other Pokemon, at least. So I don't think Stamina personally makes a lot of sense. But that's also, that's subjective opinion. I don't think it fits. I think it's a neat idea. I think Bulky Swampert's kind of funny. I think that goes into the camp of fixing existing problems versus matching what the design intent is. Yeah, I don't know why this exists.
This one is just ridiculous. Let's put aside the fact that Durant has not one, but 2 great abilities. We mostly know it to live and die by the added strength and lowered accuracy of Hustle, but some players who simply want to hit its accurate moves have opted for Swarm. It's not even about the boost of bug moves when it dips to 33% health or lower. That's very good, of course, but it's generally not playing with that game plan. Most of the time, it functionally has no ability, and that's just fine, because Durant is just such a good Pokemon to begin with. Swarm is really more of a bonus. Of course, Hustle is generally worth the risk because of how crazy hard it hits. You can see how they fit with Durant design-wise too, but Truant? How can a Pokemon both be on its grind set so much that it has Hustle, and also be so lazy that it has the ability Slacking gets because it just wants to lie around, eat Cheetos, and watch cartoons, despite the fact that it should have grown out of that a long time ago? Is this existential commentary by Game Freak on the potential of such duality within the human being? Well, we won't say no, maybe. But we'll also say it's a lot likelier they also gave Durant this hidden ability simply because it rhymes with his name and it's funny. Or maybe they think Kevin Durant takes his sweet
It's like Two-Bat the Zubat. Oh my god. Wow, I had to go back in time for that one. Wow, that was old completionist. That was Greg was still on there at that point in time. I missed Two-Bat the Zubat. That was a really funny bit, actually.
time getting back on defense. Who's to say? Either way, Truant being given to pretty much anything that isn't Slacking, which is pretty much there to hold back what's otherwise a monstrously dangerous Pokemon, is farcical. Yes, Durant gets entrainment, so you can give Truant to something else, but it's not like Durant needs that third ability. But hey, it'd be nice, a la its fellow Black and White RU star Druddigon. So we'll suggest it get Hyper Cutter, as being able to nullify Intimidate is nice without being outrageous, since it's not getting the hustle boost. It fits thematically too.
I think Hypercut is perfectly fine for this. I mean, yeah, I think it makes sense if the game plan is to have Funny Ant have Truant just to entrain the ability away. I think that leans into it being a very one-trick pony. Yeah, not a huge fan of that. I do think things like Hypercutter would be infinitely better. I think that Hypercutter is just useful in a lot more situations, thus leading into why is Truant the hidden ability that it gets? Keyword hidden ability. Generally, these things are supposed to be kind of banger, right? Yeah, I don't get the frisk.
Dusknoir's noir tale is as dark and doomed as they come, so universally recognized as to border on the primal. It seemed like it would become the OE spin blocker par excellence upon evolving from Dusclops in Generation 4, with Titanic defense and special defense seemingly perfectly suited to its hits-taking tasks. However, the deck was stacked against Noir from the start. It had no ace in the hole, its abysmal HP, few resistances, non-existent speed, lack of a reliable recovery, and minimal offensive output ensured it was destined to be left in a lonely place. It's only used by new trainers who didn't know any better. A noob trap. One hoped Dusknoir would come out of the past with Generation 5's revitalizing hidden abilities, the dream world bestowing new life upon the overlooked left and right. But the setup was no Politoed or Ninetales. Like a stray dog, Dusknoir hung around, hoping for some semblance of anything viable. It wound up not receiving anything at all in Generation 5. Okay, but Gen 6 gave it something, better late than never. That's when Dusknoir received Frisk. Okay, admittedly, thematically, this works. Dusknoir
Yeah.
is a noir detective. You gotta frisk some people sometimes, sure.
Sure.
But come on. It's not even that frisk is an outright bad ability. Being able to identify the held items of opposing Pokemon is potentially great. The problem is that it's not such a game-breaking effect that it justifies using a terrible Pokemon. If
Right.
you gave it as something generally good that wasn't hyper-reliant on its ability, like Keldeo or something, then that'd be great. However, it's not even close to the boost Dusknoir needs to find any sort of viability anywhere. If you really want
Forget Mega Bayonet exists.
to give it something based on its lore, then give it something that lets it steal its opponent's soul. That's the kind of drastic change needed, but then again, it doesn't even need to be that drastic. For all its flaws and faults, Noir is the kind of Pokemon that could make use of its limited talents if helped out by a good ability. It
You could potentially just give it Infiltrator.
hardly needs Wonder Guard or anything, but something as simple as Levitate would be perfect and
Yeah.
very fitting. Considering this is a Pokemon that, levitates above the ground, forget it, Jake. It's
Yeah.
Dusknoir. Also, this ability is even more useless in VGC now.
Haha, Wolf coming in with the Flutter Mane. Oh my god, what a cool dude. Wow, the Lando and the Tornadus Incarnate. Oh my god, my Whimsicott main bones are shaking right now. Let's put it this way, my Whimsicott and Tornadus have had a number of interactions with each other. Man. Ooh, yeah, those speed wars are they get pretty heated.
Because open team sheets are a thing.
Amogus. Yeah. Actually, that is a really good point. Open team sheets are a thing. Prior to... Well, it's not strictly competitive, right? If you're going on ladder, you don't know what their items are necessarily. And that was also... Team Preview was a Gen... It was 4 or 5 that honestly became a thing, right? I think. I'd have to remember which one. So if this is before Team Preview... Well, let me see if the 2-second Google search can actually fix it. When did Pokemon get Team Preview? Thank you, Google AI. That is not what I wanted to see. I don't see anything offhand. Yeah, okay, it was introduced in Gen 4, according to Reddit. So if this was 4, if it was 5, it would make more sense. But Gen 4, you do get Team Preview. I don't know. I think it interacts with Team Preview. I think I can... But even then, it didn't even get the ability till Gen 6. So, like, not even that makes sense. Like, there was a figment of an idea there. But then I remembered it was Gen 6, so we've had Team Preview that entire time. So once again, just give it thing like Levitate. Or, I don't know. Shadow Tag. Okay, maybe not that one. But yeah, no, Dusknoir is... kind of hurts my brain a little bit.
This one's a bit personal for us. Vespiquen is an extremely cool Pokemon as far as design goes, but nobody has ever had any delusions about the competitive viability of a slow bug flying type with emphasis on its defenses and no particularly impactful moves. No matter how slay you might think the attack order, defend order, heal order trio is, before they inexplicably axed them in Generation 8 anyway, because
Really?
they just couldn't let the queen be. A nice hidden ability though might give Vespiquen something cool to do at least in PU or something.
I didn't know they axed the orders. That's interesting. I wonder why they did that. That's a little wild to me, actually. Well, especially when... Because remember, Dexit was the whole thing. We don't have the whole Dex available in any game after Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So all the Switch titles, right, we don't have access to the entire national Dex. I think that Sun and Moon was the perfect way to handle regional Dexes. Now, some people do defend the idea that, like, well, it's just too much space. I'm all for let's get, like, a Coliseum or get a stadium kind of thing in Modernity. That way we can transfer all 1,000-plus Pokemon to it, right? I think that'd be incredibly fair, fun for a lot of people, focus on the competitive aspect, right? I don't know how that would fall in with their business plans. I'm also coming from older Pokemon with a completely different business philosophy. We used to get, like, that definitive version, Yellow, Crystal, Emerald, right? Platinum. Like, I come from a different era of Pokemon. I don't think that a Stadium 3 for all 1,000-plus Pokemon would make sense. And for it to be the definitive, like, competitive game people play, I don't think that would fall within, because then they might have issues selling the next game for VGC. So, But that's kind of odd to me that an entire moveset like that was completely axed. But it's by far not the only one. Gen 7, Xurkitree got Tail Glow. Sword and Shield, it doesn't get tail glow. Like, they just took it away. Now, in certain things like that, I could see being balanced. But when you just completely just gut an entire Pokemon's identity like that, that's kind of just wild to me.
This is a Pokemon that has never been viable anywhere at all. It's a crime against feminism. So what does Game Freak have for this laborious design creation of theirs? Well, when they consulted the hidden ability department, the bright side is that they gave it the same ability as Tyranitar and Mewtwo. So that's great company to be in. The not so bright side is that said ability is unnerved. Mewtwo can actually use it to bust past Chople Berry Tyranitar, funnily enough, but Tyranitar has no use for it. That's fine though, they're Tyranitar and Mewtwo. They don't really need the help. Unnerved's berry ignoring ability is certainly a fine one, potentially quite game breaking considering how impactful resist berries can be, but again, it's not a viability maker, more of an enhancer of the viability that's already there. Thus, Vespiquen with no viability to begin with has no use for it. So alternate options. In terms of design, clearly Queenly Majesty is the perfect fit for Vespiquen, otherwise known as the Royal CEO of Serving. However, as great as Queenly Majesty's priority blocking effect might be,
isn't that Serena's effect? I could see it. I think it's on brand enough. I think it's the Regenerator effect where only the Slacking line got it, but now like the Slowbro line has it. Now Funny Mushroom line has it. I do think that would be fair and fitting. Yeah, no, I could see that.
It doesn't really fit with Vespiquen's game. Vespiquen's aiming for defensive utility, and it's got a bunch of worker bees at its disposal, so we need to instead figure out a way to weaponize Vespiquen's army of simps into a unique, workable ability. These bees would gladly sacrifice themselves to sting their queen's enemies, so we think this new ability should deal 12.5% to an opponent upon switching in, while also giving it an equivalent of a solid rock and its weakening of super effective attacks. Remember, this is still going to be a slow bug flying type that's not that bulky and doesn't have too much utility. Not exactly a world beater, but this is a unique niche it could fill. It'd be especially handy with U-turn. Here's a fun scenario. You've got a Pokemon at 10% that you want to switch out and preserve for later. So you switch, but your opponent's Pokemon on the field that turn is faster, so they switch first, and Vespiquen switches in. Its ability goes off and you faint before you can switch. Gnarly stuff. Let us let Vespiquen cook and eat and leave no crumbs, at least in PU, if nothing else.
I think it would be interesting. Man, that hypothetical ability though is kind of nutty though. That would honestly make it some kind of interesting cleaner, right? Like, say your opponent, I don't know, say you get my Whimsicott down to 1 through Focus Sash, swap Whimsicott out, or you just like I have multiple Pokemon in easy reach, but every time Best Friend pops on in, right? It does like a leftovers in terms of damage, right? Like, I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be cute. I think it'd be neat. I think that it might have a degenerative effect on the game, and certain players would probably decry that would be an incredibly toxic ability, whether it is or not. I mean, that's, I think, subjective to every player, right? But I think if people have an issue with Regenerator, I think people would have an issue with Vespiquen popping on in and just sniping their Pokemon. I think it's interesting. I think it's neat. Interesting.
Speaking of unnerved, it is incredibly unnerving that the same generation Tyranitar gets knockoff, he drops all the way to RU and is unable to escape UU. The big guy clearly needs some help in the form of a hidden ability. Until now, Tyranitar was Sand. Why would you ever want anything else? Its hidden ability was a formality, or if you prefer, it was a hidden ability that could have gone to another Pokemon in greater need of it. Sand is still great support in current UU, giving T-Tar its characteristic massive special bulk while enabling Sand Rush Extra Drill. However, in terms of the OU metagame that Tyranitar was previously synonymous with since its inception, it's clear nowadays that the Sand isn't quite what it used to be, especially since most types Tyranitar might Terra into will leave it affected by its own Sand, since it's not like Sandvale, where having the ability prevents you from taking Sand damage. Extra special defense is nice, but Tyranitar needs a greater overhaul to its game in this brutal new environment, and Unnerve ain't doing jack as far as that's concerned. Did the top Tyranitars in VGC over the years ever use Unnerve? No. Here's the
I thought I saw there used to be people, they were a minority. I think it was like 5 to 10% during certain formats that would actually use Unnerve. And I never understood it. I always found infinitely more value in Sandstream, just being able to set sand, being able to override other weather effects like sun and rain that were happening, sand giving a 50% boost to defenses of rock types specifically. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Maybe you can even make a specialized Sandstream that just gives like Tyranitar 50% more defenses. Maybe it's niche enough, right? When we talk about power, you can have things that are more powerful, but you narrow their scope. Or if you want something that's generally good but not overpowered, you widen who gets it but limit the power, right? Just basic power scaling and how to balance things, right? I think it's interesting. I think like true damage, right? If you have something in a game that's true damage, generally they're not going to be the most damaging attacks, right? Like in a game where say 100 is max, you might cap it like maybe 20 true damage, right? But other things are going to be able to go like 60, 80 damage. Your really hyper niche things might actually hit the full 100 damage with setup, right? Like that's just how that works. So if you maybe make it where Tyranitar itself gets some bonus defenses, like Sand Bulwark or something like that, just keep it pretty on theme on sand. I think that could be honestly pretty cool.
The one instance we can think of where unnerved Tyranitar was used. In 2017, Sandrush Excadrill was allowed in Black and White OU, but not on the same team as a Sandstream user. If you wanted to use Excadrill on Sand, it had to be Sand Force or Mold Breaker. Rush variants were used instead of Rain as a counter to Sand. However, one player figured out a way around this. You could bring a quote-unquote Sand team with Tyranitar and Sandrush Excadrill as long as the Tyranitar was unnerved.
Right.
You were certain the opponent would bring Sand and set it up for you. That way you get to use Sandrush Excadrill and Sand without losing out on the special defense boosted tar that held you together against Latios, Alakazam, and more. Hell, with Unnerve, your Tyranitar can superpower its way through opposing Tyranitar since you'll cut through their Chapel Berry. Of course, if your opponent doesn't bring Sand, you look like a complete idiot. As you have a Tyranitar that doesn't have the special defense boost, you can't chip any of the opposing team or cut off Rain, and you have an Excadrill with functionally no ability. You'll probably lose. So it's a gigantic, stupid risk that you're not going to take in a serious game because of how spectacularly it can backfire. Unless you're a certain player whose plan was to bring this Unnerved Tyranitar Sandrush Excadrill combo, and if you saw at Team Preview that your opponent didn't bring Sand, you'd fake a disconnect and then change your sets to Sandstream Tyranitar and Sandforce Excadrill. Yeah, so with Unnerved single use ever being an instance.
I don't know about the disconnect though. I think that's one of those things that I think the integrity of the game gets a little wonky at that point. That doesn't feel very, and I use this word very loosely because it's the closest I can that like matches it. That's not very gentlemanly. That's not very sportsmanlike if you have to fake a disconnect in order to swap for the strat to work. I don't know if I'm all in on that one.
Of cheating, in spirit if not quite practice, we've sufficiently established its uselessness beyond what we already knew. And thus it's with even greater urgency that we search for a better alternative that will help restore the put upon Tyranitar. You know what we're thinking? Sheer Force. The days of Tyranitar as a defensive staple are behind us.
Sure.
And the many weaknesses of its typing, while valuable, are incredibly exploitable. It's got to lean into its offensive threat fully, and Sheer Force is the best way to do it. Not only is it befitting a Pokemon of T-Tar's raw power, it helps on both sides of the spectrum. If it wants to go all physical, both its Crunch and Rock Slide are bolstered, but if it wants to go mixed in some form or even all special, its extensive move pool gets a major boost. Most notably, Great Tusk is getting absolutely rocked by its Ice Beam, especially since Sheer Force allows Tyranitar to run Life Orb without recoil, making it hit even harder. Strength and Fire Blast is nothing to sneeze at either. We're sure it could even spam Dark Pulse nicely, ensuring it's hitting with powerful stab even if it winds up eating a burn. Whatever the case, Tyranitar's got to overcome its cases of nerves and get back to smacking opponents around as it once did so peerlessly. And that's it.
No, I think that Sheer Force T-Tar makes a lot of sense. I think that it gives it some ambiguity on how it's used. It can have its Sandstream time, but it can also say, no, we're not setting weather here. We are not actually being defensive here. We are going to go all the offense and then be able to use Life Orb without fear of recoil, right? I think that Sheer Force does fit there. I think that being able to have an ability like Sandstream, which can be used more defensively, as well as an offensive ability in Sheer Force, I do think that also fits the ambiguity of that Pokemon, because Tyranitar throughout the ages has been used as kind of a Swiss Army knife, right? Like it's been used for a lot of things, a lot of different things. It has such varied movesets. I think that it fits thematically, like overall, both like design and actual how it's been played throughout the years.
Among the never-ending list of Game Freak's neglects, the hidden abilities stand out specifically because they are the perfect excuse/opportunity to breathe new life into a Pokemon that really need it, as has been the case with many before. So it really stings when this opportunity is ignored, sometimes actively with the junk that gets dished out. We've tried to do our part to help them out if they're ever short on useful ideas. Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our choices, and if you have any ideas of your own you think that Game Freak would do well to heed. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well.
So, and I've been pretty vocal on this, Pokemon needs a better way to manipulate IVs, specifically 2-0, a negative bottle cap, if you will. That would fix a lot of issues with modern comp and people getting into the game.
And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Dr. Mint, Funky, Glitcherton, Gustavo, Hal, Nurse Jake, Jack G, Lord of the Rabbit, Pretzel SP, Raven Daytona Ring, Ray Ray, Skylaria, Soares and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, and Stoneface Colin for their major support of our videos. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.
No, I mean, I agree with most things here. I do think that Swampert, I disagree with Stamina. I'll use this video as kind of like a big, like a response video, right? Kind of. Sure, it's a reaction, absolutely, but it's kind of my response to information that he's presented, right? Articuno, I think we ended up saying that, I think Snowcloak would probably be very good. When we start talking about Dialga and Palkia, I think that the hypothetical abilities would be great. I think adaptability would be a cool power boost for them. I think it'd be honestly pretty cool. Looking at Swampert, as I disagree with that, with the choice. At this time, I can't remember what we went with, but that one fit a little better in my opinion. I think we settled on something like, not Swift Swim. I think Water Absorb would be kind of funny. Water Absorb would be kind of cute, I think. We have Durant. I mean, Truant, Durant, funny haha meme. Yeah, things like Hypercutter I think would be just a lot better. I think it'd be a lot cooler. Going into Dust Noir definitely needs some love and care, some TLC, Levitate, Shadow Tag even. Lot better abilities out there. And then we get into Vespiquen, who was like, yeah, I don't really know on that one, Captain. I think the hypothetical is pretty strong and can kind of give it a really neat niche as a sniper, so to speak. And thus going into Tyranitar, I think Sheer Force does fit pretty well. Even if it's just adaptability or something like that, I think that it does pay homage to its history and competitive Pokemon. Alas, this is a great video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoy False Swipe Gaming content when I'm looking at making a new Pokemon team, when I'm looking at a new Pokemon, when I'm curious how I can use it, even if it's just in the story. He has a backlog of videos that are just awesome to be able to kind of watch, to be kind of engaged with, right? To kind of just see how things are going and just how Pokemon has been used throughout the years, and kind of inspires ideas of my own, right? Especially if it's a Pokemon as varied as something like Starmie or Tyranitar. So thank you all for watching. You should definitely go ahead and check out False Swipe Gaming. In the description down below, I have left a link to the original video as well as his channel in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.